there is no such thing as a non-living wage. Nobody dies on their wage. And that is not a thing that happens inside the United States.
Ben Shapiro is unfamiliar with the United States of America, a country in which he lives in. Let's hear more from what he has to say.
Well, I mean, first of all, the wage to cost of living gap would not exist in the absence of regulation and subsidy, at least not nearly as much. The fact of the matter is that one of the reasons you have housing shortages in blue areas is because of development restrictions that are largely created by the left. The reason that you have massive inflation right now is, again, because of left-wing financial policy. It tends to be that wages move in tandem with costs, generally speaking, because, again, there is no such thing as a non-living wage. Nobody dies on their wage. And that is not a thing that happens inside the United States. This is why when people say living wage, the question is, well, what do you mean by a non-living wage? Do you just mean a wage that you don't think is high enough? And for what job? And what does the market look like?
Okay, so interestingly enough, in that argument that overall was incorrect about the non-existence of a non-living wage, there were little kernels of truth, right? So in regard to the housing development restrictions, that is definitely true, especially in a place like California. There's this whole thing called NIMBYism, no, not in my backyard. And they'll use all sorts of concerns about the environment or whatever to prevent building new housing. And it has been a disaster. Lower supply, high demand, that's gonna inflate the cost of housing. Also, what he was referring to about monetary policy, I don't know if I would refer to that as a left-wing policy, but it's the Federal Reserve, artificially lowering interest rates or doing something that's called quantitative easing, where they provide liquidity to banks and then private equity firms, and they take the money and they buy up all the housing, thus inflating the value of the. That's the only area where he's being accurate. But when it comes to the existence of a non-living wage, I mean, the data speaks for itself, and we're gonna get to that in just a minute. But Cenk, I know you're chomping at the bit.
Yeah, so look, I figured out Ben Shapiro, it's not that hard. I put on the decoder ring, he just talks about everything from a rich person's perspective. And so if you're rich, you listen to him and go, oh yeah, I love that, yeah, that makes sense, right? But for the rest of you like scratch your head like, what planet does he live on, right? So my guess is that he's never come close to being poor or knowing anyone who's poor and the struggles that come with it. So let me give you context for what I mean in this particular case. So he has a view, there's two different views of the market. He has the view of a rich person, which is the markets are nearly perfect, and a right winger, nearly perfect, so you get the wages that you deserve. The market works so efficiently with the invisible hand of the market, I deserve tons of money and you deserve very little, okay? And that's why the market efficiently gave you very little. And now, the second way to look at that is, no, you schmuck, the markets are not perfect. And what do you mean perfect? Perfect for whom, right? So what the market actually does is it creates companies through the invisible hand of the market, same phenomenon, that pay their workers as little as humanly possible so they reduce their costs so they can maximize profit. And in fact, companies like Walmart know that the government will step in and make sure that you don't starve, even though you're not getting a living wage. They know that you're gonna take food stamps and you're gonna go on Medicaid. We've talked to guests about this that have excellent data and written books about it.
Right.
Giant companies force you onto government programs by paying you so little, you literally won't be able to survive without those government programs. And they take advantage of those subsidies to then crush small businesses. But all of this is so that the market can give you the worst possible wage. That's economic reality.
And the reason why companies want to pay you as little as possible is because labor is not seen as an asset within a company, right? Labor is seen as a cost that should be minimized to the largest extent possible, so you can provide a return on shareholders or to shareholders. Now, Ben Shapiro has been vociferous in his disdain for how the Biden administration has handled the Ohio train derailment, right? And we have as well. But we're calling for more regulation so a company like Norfolk Southern doesn't cut 33% of its workforce on purpose in 1 year in an effort to lower costs and maximize profits for their shareholders, right? So they eliminate jobs, or they fight tooth and nail to prevent a federal, wage hike. Anything that they can do to keep costs associated with labor as low as possible. Now let's take a look at productivity and pay in this country, okay? Inequality is rising as workers are increasingly cut out of the economic returns to productivity growth. So you see that the productivity increased significantly since the 1970s, but starting in the 1970s, wages, hourly compensation stagnated and did not keep up with inflation. So let's be clear on that. Let's give you some more details. As of October of 2022, 60% of Americans were living paycheck to paycheck, according to a recent Lending Club report. A year before, the number of adults who felt stretched too thin was closer to 56%. So are 60% of Americans making a living wage but are lying about it? Okay, let's give you more. Nearly 1 in 5 US adults, 18%, about 46 million people report that if they needed access to quality healthcare today, they would be unable to pay for it. The chances of any given household suffering from this form of healthcare insecurity are inversely related to annual household income, with 35% of respondents from low-income households, those earning under $24,000 per year, reporting forging care in the prior 12 months. So what's the argument? Like, what's the counter from Ben Shapiro on this? Is it that this massive portion of American workers are lazy, or they did something wrong? I just, how do you ignore this data? There's more. I'm gonna go to the very last thing that I noticed. So there was a 2021 study published by the Becker-Friedman Institute, and here's what they found. More than half of the sheltered homeless adult population under the age of 65 worked at some point in 2010, while a still substantial 40% of the unsheltered homeless population worked. We live in a country where you can work, you can earn a wage and still not make enough money to pay for housing because of how unbelievably low the wages are and how expensive the housing is.
Yeah, that's why I said I don't think he's ever talked to a person who had economic pain. Because, so for example, I remember I went like about 15 years on fumes. And so I had to make sure that I can get at least 2 to 3 meals out of my mac and cheese, which costs about 99 cents. But you have to figure in the cost of milk too, and then you have to take in the cost of milk and the cereal. How many meals can I get out of a box of cereal, et cetera? Why? Because I gotta pay the rent, right? And if you don't have enough money, you can't pay the rent, you can't eat. But to Shapiro, this appears to be all like foreign entities. He's never heard of this stuff. So he just blithely says like, what's the big deal? I mean, everybody lives. I mean, I don't see you starving. So okay, you're covered. I'm not starving, you're not starving, we're equal. No, we're not at all equal. And now, okay, you can say, hey, listen guys, sometimes the janitor doesn't make as much as the CEO. That's fair, we get it. We're not saying everybody's gonna make the same amount of money, okay? But how are the rules rigged?
Yep.
So I wanna go back to that first graph because we talk about it on the show all the time. Corporations are gonna maximize profit, they're gonna cut costs, they're gonna pay you as low as humanly possible because they have a fiduciary responsibility.
To their shareholders, yeah.
We don't even blame them for it. It's just they're amoral machines.
I don't blame them for it. It's the way the system is designed, and it's the system that Ben Shapiro wants to protect and provide cover for.
Exactly, so you don't rage at the machine and go, oh, corporations do better, be more patriotic, be more moral. No, honestly, people who don't understand the system at all say inane things like that, right? No, the government is supposed to protect us. Cops, fire department, and for other developed nations, universal healthcare so you don't die, right? And they protect you from business interests who are going to maximize profit at your expense. How do they protect you? Paid family leave, higher minimum wage, social safety net, different things that Ben Shapiro says are terrible. Now, how's the system rigged? Go back to the first graph. This is in my book, Justice is Coming, and it's one of the few graphs that I put in there. Why? Guys, your productivity is sky high, as Anna pointed out. That's the dark blue line. Your wages have flatlined, that's the light blue line. But here's a shocking fact. The difference between those two things on a yearly basis is about $17,000 a year. So that means if your wages kept up with how hard you're working, your productivity, you all would have been paid $17,000 a year more on average for all of those years. Can you imagine if you had $17,000 more every single year, right? But the rich rigged the rules by legally bribing politicians to create that graph, to create the phenomenon that gave you that graph. And so whenever we point out that they're rigging the rules, they go, oh, what? No, don't fight for the workers. They're not even starving. They're not even starving, okay? No, we must protect the rich, and eventually it'll trickle down on you. No, they've been robbing you blind, and the people who helped them do it, by the way, are the politicians.
And by the way, I also want to just quickly mention, the good people of Florida voted in favor of a ballot initiative to increase their minimum wage to $15 an hour. And Florida is where he's currently living, so I'm pretty sure he's aware of that, right? It took a ballot initiative for the voters, the workers in this country, particularly in that case in Florida, to have a voice on this issue. And I love it. Anytime Ben Shapiro talks about the economy and not the culture wars, I jump in it, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a reason why most of the content coming from right-wing media is hyper-focused on the culture wars, which serves to divide us constantly and serves to distract us from the fact that we do share one thing in common, a pretty big issue, and that's the fact that we're all furious at the rigged economic system that will have Americans living in literally the richest country in the world, working 40 hours a week and still not making enough money to pay for their rent. Think about that for a second. So when he makes these points, it's like, I get why you want to talk about the culture war, and mostly only the culture war.
And look, you could see in the media the difference between the honest programming and not so honest programming. So why did they have to do a ballot initiative in Florida? Because the Republican politicians would not pass it no matter what the voters wanted. And it turns out when you gave it to the voters, 2/3 of them said, yes, I want it. And the Republicans have been blocking that all along. But we are honest. He'll always protect the Republicans. He'll always blame the Democrats. And that's what he does about 200% of the time, okay? But to be fair to him, that's what every right-wing media does, okay? We, on the other hand, tell you, Biden told you he was gonna get a $15 minimum wage, but he was lying.
Yep.
He threw it under the bus the minute he got into office.
That's right.
Democrats are liars that unless they're progressives like Bernie Sanders, just Democrats, etc. And they never do what they tell you to do. And the Republicans are just brazen criminals who say, oh yeah, I took money from the rich, I served the rich. Who cares? That's the way America should be. It's a meritocracy. The rich are awesome. And they get the guys who are not at all rich to cheerlead for them. It's so sad. Understand how this country and this system actually works. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.